Okay, so welcome back to our series on land navigation. So we went through in the previous video a selection of different types of maps that you could be used for learning or using land navigation skills. We're going to learn how to read a map using a basic city map first. So if you have access to a city map, if your city has maybe a visitor area, or a visitor center where they could provide maps. You can get one. You can get a paper map out of a phone book, or you can simply print off a Google map of your area. And what I want to do is basically start off in very basic kind of skills that then can be transferred to a topographical map. We want to start with a city map for two reasons. One is it removes a lot of excess noise that we don't need for learning map and compass skills. Second is that oftentimes people are not well practiced. Navigation is a perishable skill, just like shooting, just like first aid. And one reason why they're not well practiced in land navigation is that they don't know how to, or haven't been taught how to translate practicing their navigation skills to areas that are more accessible, whether they be county parks, a city park, a cityscape. Wilderness areas are often more remote from most people, harder to get to, and as such you're not there very often, which means you're not practicing those skills, which means that by the time you get to the trailhead, you've got everything packed and you're ready to go. You pull out your compass and then you scratch your head trying to wonder, how do you use these things again? Whereas you can start your navigation, land navigation exploration or understanding with a basic city map and be able to get the foundations before you graduate into a more comprehensive topographical map. Okay, so with that knowledge, there are features that's pretty transferable to almost all maps. So in most situations, a developed road is going to be a thick black line. Not always, but most maps. All right, so there will always be a key on what those different roads mean. Thick black line could also be a boundary. Boundaries are often depicted by, if not a black line, by shading of some kind. Generally speaking, green shading in most areas means a forested area. A lighter colored shading, like white on a USGS topographical map, means an open area. But shading could also indicate the difference between the state property or national forest property or city boundaries with private land. So it's important to know what the shading, what the colors mean. Blue is almost always going to be a body of water. So a ribbon of blue, like here, is going to mean a river. The thickness of that river is going to indicate the size of that river. So a large river here versus a small river or a creek, right? Or a dashed line would indicate an intermittent stream, which means that there's not always water present. Trails are, many times trails are dotted lines, but not always. And railroad tracks are almost always have the ties depicted in the trail, so you can distinguish the difference between a hiking trail or an undeveloped road versus what a railroad is. Roads and rivers are almost always labeled to some degree, so to kind of help you with that orientation. When we talk about contour lines, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but contour lines, like on this map here, gives you the ability to understand topography or the terrain, terrain elevation. So we'll talk about this in a later video when we talk about contour lines. But essentially, the closer these lines, the steeper the hill. So this is a very steep drop off right here into this valley, and this is a much more gradual hill up to the top of this kind of ridge line. So so we're going to kind of ignore topography at this moment because we want to learn the basics. We don't need to worry about going up and down hills, and we don't need to learn about how to read topography at this point. We just need our basic skills. So every map is going to have a legend. That legend is going to give us some different information. When we talk about topographical maps, we'll talk about some of the specific things in that legend, but basically you want to understand what the features of the map means, and legends will have that. Unfortunately, I cut the legend out of this map. But oftentimes they're going to have a scale, so it's depicted here. So this is 1.5 miles. So the city is about maybe almost 3 miles in width. And then you're going to have your compass rose that's going to indicate where north is. Okay? And that's going to be important as well for orienting ourselves. So our basic thing is just understanding what the features mean. This is a pretty straightforward map in that you can pretty much infer that dark green is a park, the yellow is going to be the city boundaries or city limits. Green here is going to be private or agricultural land. We got the river, we got our roads going through there. We have our scale on here, so we have an understanding of distance on that, and we know where our north is on the map. Now I think we're ready to start getting into the next part, which is reading a map. So a lot of times people want to jump into what's called dead reckoning when they're using a map and compass, or start using their compass right away. And dead reckoning refers to, quite often, the use of these ranger beads. I don't think that's necessary. I think you need to learn dead reckoning by time first, and before you can get to that, I think we need to learn some basics on your compass. So this might be very elementary to some people, but I think that these basic skills are important for all people to fundamentally understand. So when we're talking about learning how to read a map, and the reason why we want to get to map reading first is that the compass itself is a precision tool. It's supposed to be adding precision to our movement. We can actually move quite freely around without a compass, and we do this all the time when we're using a street map. We have a lot more references to of the terrain to associate to. So this is a terrain association is essentially how we have adapted, or how we understand how to navigate or understand our spatial conditions. It's something that we've evolved to for a long time ago, so this is something that's going to be very natural for many people, and this is where I think we have to start when we talk about map and compass use, is how to read the map and how to use our terrain. What often happens is when we remove terrain from our environment, people tend to get lost. So if you live in a place like on a coastal area, you know where the beaches are going to be, the coast is going to be. If you live in a mountainous area, you're using mountains either consciously or subconsciously as reference points to your locating yourself spatially. If you live in the city of Chicago, we have, you know, the Lake Michigan, right? And you have buildings, skyscrapers that act as landmarks. You have water towers in small towns that help orient you to where you need to be. Another thing that we often use is the sun, which can be a little misleading as well. But it gives us some kind of orientation, okay? And when we are disoriented, it means that we don't understand north, south, east, and west. And a lot of times, although people don't express themselves, you'll say, I'll go down to this market by heading south on, 5th Street. Well, if you're not familiar with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, you're giving somebody information that they don't understand. So then what we do is we say, well, you want to go past, south of 6th, you want to go past 2nd Street to the market, turn left, and the market will be right there. If you go past the railroad tracks, you've gone too far. That's essentially terrain association, and we might not know it. And what you are doing here in this example is the same thing as how navigating a wilderness area is. So what we do is, in terrain association, is we orient ourselves or map to our environment around us, and we can do that without a compass. Again, you use the compass for that higher degree of accuracy. But what we're going to do then when we first orient ourselves with our map, let's say we're visiting this area and we want to visit the courthouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the map and we're going to turn it simply to match up the streets that we're driving on. So if we're heading south on 4th Street, we're heading this direction, we're going to turn our map so that when we're giving our driver directions, we can say turn left or turn right, our map is properly oriented. So instead of using left or right, we're using east or west, for example. All right, and so now that we understand how we're orienting our maps and we're using left and right in relation to north-south, things might start making a little bit more sense for people who are not familiar with how to read a map or how navigation works. And so we're just trying to take the concepts of street travel, which is no different than trail travel. It's just in a very straight, predictable line. Okay. So, the first thing that we're going to learn about in terrain association is once we've oriented ourselves generally to this area, we've turned our map to face the features that we see around us. All right, so this could be water towers, it could be buildings, it could be a park, it could be a river, it could be the streets. Next, what we're going to do is, if we wanted to go to this courthouse, and we're here in this park right here, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to look for a handrail. And handrail is used to kind of orient yourself to the direction of travel that you're at. So we